Morning, ladies and gents. How we doing today, y'all? Listen, this right here is the Dualsense Edge controller by Sony for the PlayStation 5. And well, it's $200. And that is a lot of money for a controller. So today I want to figure out, is this worth the money? Is it worth your hard-earned money that you work very hard for to go out there and buy? And when you do that, and if it is worth it, what exactly are you getting out of it? Because for $200, I have certain expectations out of this thing. Without further ado, my name is Francisco. I'm here to help you make smart purchasing decisions. Let's get started. Inside the box, of course, we're going to find the controller, the USB braided cable, carrying case, connector housing, an assortment of stick caps, including the standard caps, high dome caps, low dome caps, and two different sets of back buttons. We have the half dome back buttons and, of course, the traditional lever back buttons. In regards to build, the PS5 Dualsense Edge controller is a phenomenally well-built controller. About the only concern that I have with this controller is that it is still an all-plastic controller. Now, that's an issue for me, not because I'm worried about the controller being damaged, because frankly, it's a very well-built and sturdy controller, so I don't think we're going to damage it if we drop it or if we throw it at a wall. Depending on how hard you toss it, of course. You might damage some internals, but the exterior of the controller I think will be fine. The reason that the all plastic build concerns me is that at $200, we get plastic. And that kind of goes against what I believe we should be getting when we're paying premium price for a premium product. Look at the Xbox Elite controllers, for example. Those come in at about what, 150, 200 bucks a piece? Correct me if I'm wrong. And you get a metal build controller. Like when you look at it and when you hold it and you feel it, you can tell that this is a premium version of the Xbox controller. And the same can be said about the Dualsense Edge. However, it's still a plastic controller, which is slightly disappointing. But as far as build is concerned, that is where the disappointment ends, because everything else about this controller is fantastic. I mean, the form factor is literally identical to that of the original Dualsense controller. Looking at these two controllers with some obvious coloration differences, you can't really tell the difference between the Dualsense Edge and the original Dualsense controller. Where we will spot some differences though are the weights of the controller, and the weight differences aren't as big as you think they would be, but they're noticeable. I can tell that the Dualsense Edge controller is slightly heavier than the original Dualsense controller because obviously there's a lot more components inside because of what this controller does. So overall, in regard to build, I'm not overly concerned. I'm slightly disappointed in one little area, but again, we're not paying $200 for this controller because of how it looks and how it feels. We're paying $200 for what this controller does. So let's get right into that. Let's have a look at some of the physical features and benefits of the Dualsense Edge. And of course, we're going to go ahead and start with the ability to go ahead and pop off your analog caps like so, and you're able to replace them with any of the other caps that come included with the packaging. One thing to note here, and big difference between this and like say the Elite controller, I prefer the way the Elite controller does it. The Elite controller uses a magnetic way of attaching and detaching the analog sticks to the controller itself, whereas these are basically snapped in and snapped off with plastic. And that feels fine when you're doing it, but I can imagine that after a while of doing this, if you're somebody who's frequently swapping out your analog caps left and right, over time, I'm wondering if this is going to wear off and if it's going to become a problem. Now, suppose I'm right, and after some time taking caps on, putting caps on, this mechanism wears off and you're unable to basically resecure your cap onto the analog stick, or maybe for some reason, which happens a lot unfortunately these days, you start experiencing stick drift. You would think that you would have to go out there and buy an entirely new controller, be it the original Dualsense for like 70 bucks or another Dualsense Edge for $200. That would be a pretty crappy situation to find yourself in, and it looks like PlayStation thought a little bit ahead and made things slightly easier. So if you find yourself in that situation, one thing that you can do, which I appreciate that they gave us the ability to do this, is, for example, I'll take the back paddle that comes included with the controller. There is a release switch right here at the very back of the controller. If you use one portion of the paddle, you pop the tab and you're able to remove this front cover right here. And that basically exposes two little levers that you hear on the sides of the controller. And what you do is you basically flip the lever up like so, and you're able to remove the analog stick entirely. So if you start experiencing stick drift, or if your caps and the plastic mechanism that binds them together to the controller and to the analog sticks start wearing off, if you have any issue whatsoever with the analog sticks, you're able to individually remove them and individually replace them. You can buy one of these separately from Sony's website and they'll ship it to you, and you simply slide it back in, push the lever down to lock it in place, and then you just pop the cover back on and you're back in business, baby. Besides the ability to swap out analog caps and to be able to swap out your analog sticks in its entirety, we also have the ability to add in some paddles here at the back. You've got your traditional back paddles like you would find on the Xbox Elite controller. You just simply pop them into place right here, and boom, we have our paddles right here ready to go. Unlike the Elite controller that comes with 4 paddles, right, 2 on each side, the Dualsense Edge only comes with the ability to use 2, which I think in this case, honestly, works better than having 4. Because when I look at my hand placement when I'm playing these games, my tall mans right here, my tall men, are perfectly placed with where these paddles are. When I used an Elite controller, I had to move that finger around or try and use my ring man also to be able to use the other 2 controller paddles that I had at the back. It didn't feel great. It didn't feel organic. And honestly, the fact that I've only got these 2 and they're perfectly placed right here feels so much more natural to me than it did compared to the Elite controller. But not only did they give us these paddles, they also gave us these weird dome things. Let me show you here in just a second. These are the half dome back paddles, and they work and function like triggers. So now instead of my fingers resting all the way at the back over here, they're resting up against a half dome back paddle right here. I've tried playing this way with this controller and it's never felt right to me. But I can definitely see how this would be beneficial for somebody playing a first-person shooter or a shooter in general where they don't want to necessarily rest their fingers all the way to the back against the rear of the controller, but instead having them resting up against these half-dome caps, which just, I think, provide a little bit more support than the paddles, but at the same time, for me at least, just don't feel natural at all. But maybe you might like them. I don't know. Okay, so now let's cover some of the software features and benefits that the Dualsense Edge gives us when we are using it with the PlayStation 5. The first thing I want to cover with y'all is let's go ahead and set up some profiles, because one of the cool things about this controller is that we're able to create multiple profiles, up to 4 profiles for every controller. And I know some of you are going to ask, so I'm going to tell you right now, the profiles are saved on the controller. I'm not sure if they're saved on the system as well, but they are 1000% saved on the controller, and I'll elaborate on that in a little bit. You want to go to your settings, and by the way, when you plug the controller in for the first time into your system, the PS5 will prompt you to walk through a bit of a setup tour that'll kind of guide you through some of the other features and benefits of the controller, including having you create your own profiles and show you how to set everything up, which you'll do right then and there. And it's very, 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 very user-friendly and very easy. But in the event that you, for some reason, missed that, you want to go to your settings in your controller, and we're going to go ahead and go to accessories. Dualsense Edge wireless controller becomes its own option, and we're going to go to custom profiles right over here. So I've already got 2 profiles made. I have one for God of War and one for The Witcher 3. I'll tell you why those in a moment. But anyways, you can go over here and create a custom profile. And, you know, for shiggles, we're going to go ahead and call it the GNR profile. All right, hit OK. And when you create a profile, you're able to customize the button assignments, stick sensitivity and dead zones, trigger dead zones, vibration intensity, and trigger effect intensity. Under customized button assignments, you're able to go through and reassign what inputs register upon a button press. So for example, if I want to make my back right paddle right here register as circle, I simply just do that right there. And I can go over here to the left, and maybe I want this one to register as square. And so once you've decided what you want to assign to what button, you simply go over here and you hit apply and you're done. So for stick sensitivity and dead zone, you're able to adjust and custom tailor the sensitivity and the dead zones for your analog sticks. The cool thing here is that there are some presets that come included with it. You got default, you got quick, you got precise, steady, digital, dynamic, and under each one of them, it gives you an explanation as to how it impacts the movement of the analog stick and what kind of games traditionally benefit from using each one of these presets. As for trigger dead zones, as the name implies, here you are basically customizing and changing up the trigger dead zones and how they react to different things. You're able to input different ranges. I don't mess with this too much, so I don't want to sit here and tell you things that I don't know what I'm talking about. But if you know what you're doing here, you're going to have a field day. As far as triggers are concerned, the other thing I want to bring to light here is that on the back of the controller, we do have these two switches for each trigger, for the L2 and for the R2. And at the very top, what you're going to see is the default trigger setting, where you have to depress the button all the way up until you hit the controller to register the input for the R2 and the L2 right here. If you move either one or both of these switches down one notch, then what you're going to do is basically you're decreasing the amount of distance it takes for the button input to register. So this is default. I'm going to go slowly, left, and now I'm going to go ahead and move the switch down, and I'm going just as slow as I can, as I was earlier, and look how much faster it registers that input, okay? Now let's go all the way down to the very bottom, the fastest setting that the controller offers. Barely. I barely have to touch R2 and L2 to register the R2 and L2 inputs. This is highly beneficial for anybody playing games like Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, Warzone 2, what have you. Anything with shooting, if you don't want to switch your shooting input from R2 to R1, you simply bring this notch all the way down to the bottom, and it's as if you had it registered at R1, because it is a barely tap. You barely tap R2 and you are shooting, which can be the difference between winning and not. Vibration intensity, self-explanatory. Trigger effect intensity, self-explanatory. So you've got your profile set up. You have a couple of them made for a couple of different kinds of games that you play. And it would be annoying if you had to constantly go into the main menu of the system, into the settings of the system, all the way to accessories, and then switch your profiles there. And thankfully, PlayStation thought about this and they made it super, super easy. You may have noticed that underneath both analog sticks, we have these two little buttons right here. These are the function buttons for the DualSense Edge controller. And all you need to do is simply, and I'm going to show you real quick. All you got to do is hold down the function button, and this little sub menu pops up at the very bottom. And as you can tell, the profiles that you make, up to 4, are assigned to each one of the face buttons right here: square, triangle, circle, X. Right now, I've only got 3 profiles. I have my default profile on triangle, my God of War profile on circle, and my Witcher 3 profile on X. The reason I have those profiles set up that way is because I have the dodge button for either one of those games assigned to my right paddle. It's just more natural for me. It feels great and it works, right? So we're playing The Witcher 3, all right? And I'm gonna go attack this this guy over here. I'm hitting circle to dodge right now because that's just how we traditionally would have played when we're using a regular DualSense controller. Now I've set up my profile to where the rear right paddle is my dodge button. But let's see what happens. It's dodging, but it's the roll dodge. I don't want that. I want the sidestep dodge, right? Because I want to be able to control everything that's going on. So all I need to do, instead of backing out into the main menu of the system, going to the accessories menu, going to the DualSense Edge menu, and redoing my profile there or swapping my profile, all I got to do is hold down the function button and hit X, and now it automatically loads up my Witcher 3 profile. And now look what happens. I hit the back paddle on the right, and now I'm doing my little sidestep dodge.
Lost your nerve?
Burn him over to a crisp, and that's a wrap. Swapping your profiles is as easy as that. In this example, I'm playing God of War Ragnarok, and right now I've got my God of War profile loaded up on the controller, so when I press my back left rear paddle, I automatically block and deploy my shield. And if you time this correctly, you're going to go ahead and parry. If you double tap it, you do a shield bash, right? Now, if I want to shoot arrows with either Atreus or Freya, sorry for the spoilers if you haven't played the game, I would have to hit square, like you can see right there, right? But I want to change that. I've tried playing it this way, and maybe I just don't really like it this way. I would rather have the ability to shoot arrows by pressing the left rear paddle as opposed to hitting square, and I'm perfectly okay with holding and pressing L1 to block. So instead of having to go through all these menus to get to the profile section, you simply hold down the function button on the controller and you hit what I still call the start button, and it automatically brings you to the custom profiles page. You can already tell it's going to bring you exactly to the profile you have loaded up. So I simply hit X on God of War, custom button assignments. I go all the way down to the bottom. I want to change my left paddle, so I hit that. And instead of having it set to L1, I'm going to set it to square. I'm going to hit apply. And now I just back out. And let's see what happens. Left paddle should start shooting. L1, as it is by default in the game, is block and parry. Simple as that. I absolutely love how easy Sony and PlayStation have made it to swap between profiles and how easy and quick it is to get to your profiles and edit them in real time while you're playing your game. But there's more, okay? Check this out. So not only can you adjust the profiles and change profiles and swap between profiles and edit profiles by using the function button, one of the cool little quality of life changes and enhancements this controller brings to us players on the PS5 is that we are now able to adjust the headset volume within the game without having to press the home button and scroll down and go over here to the volume option and change it there. That's always been something I've been very annoyed with and why I never, ever play with a headset plugged into the controller. But with the Dualsense Edge, you simply hold down the function button and you press up to increase volume or down to decrease volume. Just like that. Simple, easy, clean. I absolutely love it. Now, if this was an instance where I had party chat going on and I'm playing a game on PS5 and I want to adjust the balance between party chat and the game audio, I simply hold down the function button and I press left and right to adjust the balance. Love it. Okay, so you want to use the Dualsense Edge controller on your PC. I don't blame you because, again, there are some games that I adore playing with mouse and keyboard, but then there are just some other games I would prefer to use a controller. And when I have a controller like this, I want to get the most out of it, okay? So in order to use the Dualsense Edge controller and to get the most out of it, you're gonna have to use the controller with a wired connection with the supplied USB-C cable. I know I don't need to show you this, but I'm gonna do it anyways. You just plug the controller into the back of your motherboard or to a USB port of your choosing on the front, on the top, on the back, wherever it may be. And then you just plug in the cable right here. Bam. And just like that, it is now registered on my computer. One of the cool things that this controller also does come with, which we covered way earlier in the video, is a locking connector. Is that what it's called? A connector housing, I'm sorry. And that's what this little thing here is, okay? So if you put your USB-C cable end inside this connector and you close it like this, then you're able to go ahead and connect it to the controller and you flip this switch down to locked. And now ain't nothing happening to this connection. It is locked, safe, and secure, and it is not coming off the controller. Okay, so we've got the controller connected to my computer. We've loaded up Dead Space here on Steam. And you know, the two biggest questions that I had when I was using this computer before I even started playing around with it is, do the profiles save to the controller? And am I able to switch profiles on my PC if they are saved to the controller? So if I recall correctly, my God of War profile has the square button mapped to the left rear paddle, which in Dead Space is your reload. So let's go ahead and test this out. I'm going to go ahead and take a shot and I'm going to press the left paddle here. See? Boop. Reload. Love it. Knowing now that my profile is saved to the controller and I have 3 profiles on my controller right now. I've got my God of War, my Witcher 3, and my default profile. If I'm able to successfully switch between profiles without having to reconnect this to the PlayStation 5, then in theory, if I press down my function button and I hit triangle and I switch to the default setting, the default profile, when I press my rear left paddle, nothing should happen because I never touched that profile. I left it alone. All right, I'm going to switch it back again to the Witcher profile and I'm going to shoot and I press the left paddle and I reload. And the moment I found out that my profiles are both saved on the controller and I'm able to switch my profiles instantaneously on PC without having to even touch the PlayStation 5 after I set the controller up, I was sold. I was sold before that, but now I am super sold on this controller. When I first bought the controller, I didn't have any worry or concerns regarding its performance with the PlayStation 5. I felt confidently and strongly that a controller designed by Sony for Sony would perform well on Sony's console, and that is the case here, is that this controller works fantastically well on the PS5 console. The only real critiques and complaints that I have here are, well, number one, you know, for a $200 controller to be made entirely of plastic is a little underwhelming. Although the plastic is very durable, it feels premium, it feels very nice. The form factor is still the same. I don't really have too much of a complaint to make there, but a small one nonetheless, okay? The other complaint that I do have with the controller, again, considering that we're paying $200 for this, is that the caps are basically held in place and locked in using plastic, whereas the Xbox Elite controllers use a magnetic mechanism, if you will, to hold the analogs in place. And you can tell, all right, if you've ever used an Elite controller, you can tell the minute you remove them and put them back on. And when the two magnets attract and just kind of snap on into place, it feels really good. It feels very premium. I cannot say the same for the DualSense Edge controller right here. And that's about where my complaints end, because outside of those two issues, I love this controller. I think this controller is incredibly well built for the most part. It feels great to hold in the hands. It feels great to play with. The customization, right, is so easy. It's so streamlined. It's so simple. The profiles saved to the controller to the point where they carry over into PC. I'm able to load up my profiles on PC while I'm playing any game on PC. And not only that, but then I'm also able to swap between profiles on my computer without having to involve the PlayStation 5. The PlayStation 5 involvements, as far as using this on a computer, is setting up the profiles, right? You got to set the profiles up on PS5. But once you've got that done and taken care of, you don't have to touch the PS5 anymore if you only want to use this on PC. Which brings me now technically to my third complaint. I would like to see Sony integrate the ability to edit the profiles on your computer, because I bought this not for my PS5. I bought this for PC because I just wanted a better controller to use when I'm playing on computer. And I will tell you this, I forgot one thing. Not only does the profile and the button inputs carry over to your computer, but the dead zone settings for your analog sticks also carry over when you're playing on PC. So keep that in mind. In the sake of full transparency, I will tell you that there is one broad stroke general complaint about the controller regarding its battery life. Now, I've read through various forums and articles and posts about this thing, and I don't know if it's all fact, so take it with a grain of salt. But from what I understand is that in order to keep the form factor relatively the same and to not affect the weight too much, the battery for the DualSense Edge is about 1/3 smaller than it is compared to the regular DualSense controller, which means that you're going to have less juice in there, which means naturally you're going to have less battery life out of this controller. That means you're going to have to recharge it faster than you would the original DualSense controller. That to me isn't that big of an issue because it comes with a USB cable that you can connect to the system to play while you charge. And honestly, since I'm primarily using this more on PC than I am on console, in order to use it on PC, I have to connect it to the computer anyway, which means that the battery is basically useless for my cases. But it may not be the case for you. But again, everything that you get out of the controller for $200, the battery life being 1/3 smaller isn't ideal by any means. It's not a deal breaker for me. It might be for you, but it is not a deal breaker for me. So who do I recommend the DualSense Edge to? Well, honestly, anybody. I'm a casual gamer, right? I don't play competitive gameplay. I will play things like Call of Duty or some other competitive games here and there, very seldom. I'm primarily a single player or RPG kind of player. I don't really play competitive shooters as much anymore. I'll play Call of Duty for like the first 2 weeks that it's out. After that, you realize that the game is the same thing over and over and over again, and I stop playing. So I can't sit here and tell you, well, I only recommend this for pro players because it's got all the pro features. No, this controller is full of features that make gameplay better, more streamlined, more efficient, easier, and a lot more enjoyable. And if you're somebody who has $200 to spend and wants a controller that's going to make your life a little bit easier and more enjoyable, this is a controller you should absolutely consider to get. So I hope you found the review helpful. It's a little bit longer than normal. That's what she said. But I wanted to make sure I cover everything in as much depth as I possibly could. So if you enjoyed the review, you enjoyed the information, let me know in the comments below. Like the video, share it. If you feel somebody needs to know about this and they're considering buying a controller and you're waiting for a good review to let them know whether or not this is the right buy for them, let them know to watch this video. Until next time, be good to yourselves, be good to one another. Peace out.